Throughout all of history, we have witnessed examples of different racial groups coming to America to seek a better life. Whether they were motivated by money, social relations, or a combination of factors, these immigrants had one thing in common: the desire for a better life. Unfortunately, the American dream was cut short for Mexican Americans when they were forced out with repatriation. The people who immigrated from Mexico to the U.S. were no different than the ones before them. They sought a better life and were willing to work hard to earn it. After the Mexican-American War, 80,000 Mexican immigrants resided in the U.S. It has been stated that these Mexican families were guaranteed citizenship after 2 years, along with other privileges and responsibilities. As time went on, more and more Mexican families were coming to the U.S., and by the 1900s, there were about 500,000 in total. Now, the U.S. was filled with many Mexican Americans, and we saw more diversity than ever. These Chicanos were hardworking and brought great contributions to the workforce. They worked for low wages, and their jobs included railroad construction, steel mining, ranching, and farming. Despite all their hard work and efforts, Mexican Americans were treated as second-class citizens, which is defined as a citizen, especially a member of a minority group who is denied the social, political, and economic benefits of citizenship. Because they were second-class citizens, Mexican Americans were constantly being threatened by deportation. Therefore, workers had limits on the things they could and could not do. For example, if they were unhappy with their work conditions, they could not protest because this would make them an easier target for deportation. The next difficulty Mexican Americans underwent was the nightmare of repatriation, meaning they were forced out of the country. The U.S. held the view that all immigrants were illegal, and therefore, between 1929 and 1944, over 2 million U.S. citizens and legal residents of Mexican descent were sent back to Mexico. One method used was voluntary repatriation. Americans got Chicanos to repatriate on their own by denying their constitutional rights, conducting massive raids, and coercing them with fear. Those who chose to repatriate voluntarily had their property taken away by the government, and the money was used to pay for their transportation back to Mexico. Many times, the Mexican government also encouraged Chicanos to come back to their homeland, promising to provide them with lands for agricultural cultivation and would aid them in the best manner possible. For those who did not choose to repatriate voluntarily, Americans forced them out. By removing Mexican Americans from their jobs, they were forced to need public and private financial aid, such as welfare. Americans argued that Mexican Americans on welfare acted as burdens on the taxpayers of Los Angeles. In order to eliminate these burdens, Americans, including Los Angeles Superintendent Jensen, drove out the Mexicans and directed 15 repatriation movements just in 1934. In addition, more and more arrests were happening to the Mexican Americans. There was one incident in Los Angeles where 13 Mexicans were arrested, and of these, only one of them had a criminal record. This proves that Americans were desperate to get rid of the Mexican Americans and were willing to do anything that it took. Unfortunate as repatriation was, the sad truth is that we continue to see similar effects and maltreatments of immigrants. There continues to be racism, discrimination, and segregation. I am sure that as a Latino community, we can all remember a time when we were doubted, made fun of, or looked down upon for no reason other than our race. Many immigrants today are still seen as burdens. But we know many people who are immigrants or children of immigrants, and we know that they are hard workers who are just as deserving of the American dream as anybody else.